Okay, so in any project, you're going to identify dozens, maybe even hundreds of potential risks. But let's be real, you can't tackle them all. So, how do you separate the truly critical threats from all the background noise? Well, today, we're explaining the process that does exactly that. Qualitative risk analysis. It's how you turn a long, messy list of worries into a sharp, focused plan of action.
I mean, this is a classic project management problem, right? You've done the hard work, you've identified everything that could possibly go wrong, but now you're just staring at this massive, overwhelming list. If you try to address every single one, you're just going to burn out your team and your budget. The key isn't to work harder, it's about working smarter. So yeah, where do you even start?
Well, this is the answer. Perform Qualitative Risk Analysis is the tool that brings order to that chaos. Think of it as a filtering process. It's a way to quickly evaluate every single risk based on two really simple factors. How likely is it to happen, and how much is it going to hurt if it does? This lets us filter out all that noise and focus our precious time and money on the risks that actually matter.
So, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we're going to talk about the goal of the game, focusing on what matters. Then, we'll cover gathering your toolkit, all the inputs you're going to need. Next, we'll dive into the actual tools and techniques that take you from that long list to a prioritized one. And finally, we'll look at the result, your brand new risk roadmap.
The goal here is pretty simple. Focus. But getting there is surprisingly complex. Why? Because this process isn't really about hard numbers. It's about human judgment. Your team's perceptions, their experiences, and yep, their biases are all going to shape the entire analysis. That's why a huge part of this is not just analyzing risks, but also understanding and managing the human element that can skew the results.
Okay, so where do we begin? Before you can do any analysis at all, you have to gather your toolkit. These inputs are your foundational documents. They're the raw data and, the rules of engagement for your project. Without them, your risk assessment would just be a shot in the dark, totally inconsistent and missing crucial context. And here are those key inputs. You've got your risk management plan. That basically defines the rules for how you're going to assess risk. The risk register is your starting list of all the threats and opportunities. The assumption log? That points to potential weak spots. And the stakeholder register helps you figure out who might own each risk. All of this is then framed by lessons learned from past projects and other outside factors.
I mean, really think about it. If your team doesn't have a shared understanding of the rules, the analysis will be pure chaos. And that's exactly why the risk management plan is so critical. It defines what high impact or low probability actually means for your specific project. It gives everyone a consistent scale, a common yardstick to measure all the risks against.
Okay, with our inputs all gathered, we can move to the core of the process. This is where the transformation really happens. We're going to use a specific set of tools and techniques to turn that raw list of risks into a truly meaningful, prioritized plan. This is the fun part.
At the end of the day, everything hinges on these two dimensions. For every single risk on your list, you ask two simple questions. First, how likely is this thing to actually happen? That's your probability. And second, if it does happen, what's the damage? Or, hey, maybe the benefit to our project? That's your impact.
Now, the most common tool for this whole thing is the probability and impact matrix. It might look like a simple grid, but don't let that fool you. This thing is incredibly powerful. You just plot each risk based on its probability and impact, and bam, you can instantly see which risks are in that high priority red zone, telling you exactly where you need to focus.
But a truly robust analysis goes even deeper. You can ask other questions to get a much richer picture of each risk. Like, how soon could this happen? That's urgency. How easily could we spot it if it was happening? That's detectability. Or, can we even do anything about it? That's controllability. These extra parameters give you a much more nuanced view.
Now here's a fundamental truth. You got to remember this. Your analysis is only as good as the data you feed it. Garbage in, garbage out, right? That's why you have to constantly ask yourself about the quality of your risk info. Is it objective? Is it up to date? Because low-quality data leads to a low-quality analysis, and that can be way more dangerous than no analysis at all.
So, how do you bridge the gap between theory and reality? Well, you bring in the experts. You find people with deep experience who have seen projects just like yours succeed or fail. Their judgment, usually gathered in facilitated workshops, is what grounds your entire assessment in real-world practicality.
And because this process leans so heavily on human judgment, managing bias is absolutely essential. This is where a skilled facilitator becomes worth their weight in gold. Their job isn't just to run the meeting. It's to be a neutral guide, to challenge assumptions, to spot groupthink, and to steer the team toward a consensus that's as objective as humanly possible.
So what happens when you're tracking more than just probability and impact? A simple grid isn't going to cut it anymore. That's where a tool like a bubble chart comes in super handy. It lets you visualize 3 different dimensions at once. So here, for example, the chart can show a risk's proximity and its detectability, while the size of the bubble itself represents its overall impact. Pretty cool, huh?
So, after all that analysis, what's the actual result? What do you walk away with? Well, the outputs of this process become your new updated roadmap for navigating your project's uncertainty. The analysis actually ripples through several key documents. Your assumption log might get updated, and you might uncover new problems that go into the issue log. You'll often create a high-level risk report for leadership, but the single most important output, the one that captures all this hard work, is the updated risk register. And you have to appreciate this transformation. Your risk register is no longer just some raw list of things to worry about. It's now a strategic document. It tells a story of priority, of ownership, and of focus. This right here is the tangible result of the entire qualitative analysis process. So let's take a look at what's been added. Every risk now has a clear priority or score. A specific owner has been assigned to plan a response, and that creates accountability, which is huge. And just as important, the low-priority risks aren't just forgotten. They're placed on a watch list so you can keep an eye on them.
And that is the ultimate goal, to take all those countless possibilities and distill them down into one single prioritized list. This creates alignment and makes sure the entire team is focused on protecting the project from the exact same set of critical risks.
And that brings us full circle. By prioritizing, you make sure your team isn't overwhelmed. Instead, you can dedicate your valuable energy, your time, and your budget to managing that handful of risks that will truly determine whether your project succeeds or fails.
So you've got your prioritized list. You know who owns what, and you know where to focus. But this is just the beginning. The real question now is, what do you do with all this information? And that leads us directly into the next step, planning your risk responses.
And that was our look at Perform Qualitative Risk Analysis. It's the art and science of finding focus in a world of uncertainty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next explainer.